In эфир, the evening overview of the events of the day from the television company Ostankiно. First, briefly about the most important ones. The State Duma still cannot adopt a resolution on the message of the President about the strengthening of Russian statehood. The Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense of the CIS discussed the problems of collective defense. The President of Crimea states that despite the decree of Kravchuk, the referendum in Crimea will be conducted. Moldova becomes the 12th nation to join the program Partnership for Peace. And performances from France and Samara on Moscow stages. And now, details about these and other events. Today, the State Duma again discussed the project of the resolution on the message of the President of Russia on strengthening Russian statehood. Again, the Duma couldn't adopt the resolution on the message of the President of Russia to the Federal Assembly. The deputies were offered two options. The first, by the Council of the Duma, without political assessments. The second, by the factions of the Agrarians and the Communist Party and the new regional policy, which contained political appraisals. The decision was adopted, according to which the task force will continue work on the document. After 1 year of work, the State Duma was presented the law project on the participation of Russia in peacekeeping operations abroad, which was adopted in its first hearing. Significant commentary was made by the deputy Ansumov. He indicated the need to consider national interests of Russia in adopting a decision on participation in operations on supporting peace. Russia, it is emphasized in the text of the law, independently in each separate case, defines the feasibility of its participation. The Committee on Defense produced evidence according to which 10,000 Russian military servicemen are participating in peacekeeping actions. And according to the Ministry of Defense, the number is 1.5 times more, 16,500. The Deputy Minister of Defense of Russia, Georgy Kondratyev, stated that for peacekeeping actions in 1993, 26 billion rubles was spent. The State Duma adopted today a decision not to hear Alexei Kazannikov on the reasons for his resigning as the Prosecutor General of Russia. The question of the Prosecutor General was examined in the afternoon by the Federative Council. No decision, however, was made. Discussions will continue tomorrow. Almost the entire day, members of the Higher Chamber of the Federal Assembly worked behind closed doors, and such caution was fully justified. The situation in the zone of the state of emergency on the territories of northern Ingushetia and Ossetia remains tense, and any careless statement could become a detonator. Journalists had to literally dig up information, and as it became clear during the discussions, there were proposals to institute federative rule or a state of emergency on the entire territory of northern Ossetia. The president of Ingushetia, Ruslan Aushov, feels the proposal on introducing direct federative rule on the territory of northern Ossetia is better than his own proposal to introduce direct presidential rule. And the president of Northern Ossetia, Aksarbek Galazov, sharply opposed either presidential or federative rule. The discussion of the question will conclude tomorrow, and tomorrow a resolution will be adopted on it. For now, the view of the problem of the head of the administration of the Arkhangelsk district, Pavel Balashin. In our Federative Council, we're involving in the conflict not only the Caucasian people, but also people of Russia. I don't understand. If 95% of the subsidies is going to the republics, then I ask, on what account and why are they warring? All Russia, all the peoples of our Russian Federation are helping, and there, for that money, they buy tanks and weapons in order to kill people? This is a complex question, of course, and the situation must be examined overall. If the two leaders of Northern Ossetia and Ingushetia don't reconcile, that is, the leaders first, I feel that the conflict will last a long time. The Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin, is expected to speak on Thursday at the Federative Council session on the problem of non-payments. The decision to invite the Premier was adopted today by the members of the Higher Chamber of Parliament. We continue. The Commonwealth of Independent States enters a new phase when, on the working and ministerial levels, there is agreement on most important questions, said the head of the Russian Foreign Policy Department, Andrei Kozyrev. He said that evidence of his words is illustrated by by today's meeting of the Ministers of Defense and Foreign Affairs of the CIS. Today in Moscow, there was a session of the Soviet of Ministers of the Foreign Affairs of the CIS, in which participated the delegations of all 12 countries, including for the first time Georgia. But some of the countries were represented not by the heads of the foreign political departments, but in the opinion of the Russian Minister Andrei Kozyrev, one must not attribute political significance to this. In the agenda, there were 10 questions directed at interactions within the Commonwealth and their activities on an international level. On the question of mutual relations with the UN, the CSCE, and the program of NATO Partnership for Peace. After the session, Kozyrev told the press, "Today, there was a very interesting examination of the questions connected with joint defense of our external borders, and several decisions were adopted which move the Commonwealth forward. First of all, the Consultative Commission on the lower-level resolution of disputes, and also the Russian minister noted that difficulties arose in discussing the conventions on protecting rights of individuals belonging to national, ethnic, or religious minorities. In any way, for whatever reasons, the commentary on the project were made by representatives of Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Ukraine. In the afternoon, the ministers of foreign affairs were joined by the ministers of defense of the participating countries in the agreement on collective defense. They examined the projects of documents regulating the actions of the Council of Collective Defense, and also the question of increasing the effectiveness of peacekeeping forces in Tajikistan. The situation in Tajikistan does not improve. On the border with Afghanistan, armed opposition groups are attempting to penetrate the territory of the Republic. In Dushanbe, on the border, there are constant nightly shootings. The collective peacekeeper forces and Russian border troops do not conceal their nervousness. According to the Colonel General Pinkov, the opposition which went underground is well armed and organized. The border life troops is difficult. Each unit leading for the border is watched by groups of violators who choose a precise moment and penetrate Tajikistan. Not all are detained. It is necessary to consider the uniqueness of the borders. There, and more specifically on the 12th border outpost, visited the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, during his visit into Tajikistan. Of course, the flights over border sites and views from the tower cannot give a full picture of the situation, but the exchange of opinions at the meeting of Ministers of Foreign Affairs and the detailed conversation with military and representatives of the Supreme Soviet of the Republic gave some results. And although it is early to talk about official talks between the government of Tajikistan and the opposition, according to Andrei Kozyrev, already now a plan of action is being defined which will allow all who are concerned with the fate of the country to find a mutually acceptable point of solution. All the questions of the session in Dushanbe will be presented for a meeting of the heads of government, and the support of the CIS should play a positive role to stabilize the situation in the country. The experience of the activities of the peacekeeping forces of the CIS shows that the largest portion of expenses on protecting common borders of the CIS and supporting stability in explosive regions is taken on by the Russian army. And given that the measures are catastrophically lacking to resolve domestic problems. Minister of Defense Pavel Grachev held a press conference at which he talked about the problems of military construction in Russia. In his opinion, today the army can't be sufficiently supplied with the new types of military technology, since the defense companies are in a catastrophic state, that is, the conditions caused by conversion. The Ministry of Defense owes them great sums of money. Today, at the press conference, the Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachev, for the first time audibly stated that the financing of the army is on such a level lower than which one simply cannot go, lower than which lies full collapse. And this can be the result of that budget which is proposed to us, unfortunately, by the Ministry of Finances. What regards the problem of the Black Sea Fleet, then in the opinion of Pavel Grachev, it must be decided in accordance with the Massandra Accord between Ukraine and Russia, according to which the Ukrainian part of the fleet, after the necessary inventorization, will be conveyed to Russia. Russia, for this part of the fleet, pays the necessary rental fee, and the fleet is a whole and indivisible unit, as it is now. Pavel Grachev read to the journalist the telegram of Admiral Baltin, in which it says about the continuing activities of the Ukrainian authorities involving specially designated units, AMON, with the aim of forcing the fleet's crews to take the Ukrainian oath. Leonid Kravchuk revoked the decree of Yuri Mishkov on conducting a poll in Crimea on the relations between Ukraine and Crimea. In the opinion of the Ukrainian president, the decree of the president of Crimea does not conform to the constitution of Ukraine, since under the guise of a poll, the president of Crimea is actually actually intending to conduct a consultative referendum. However, Yuri Mishkov, in an interview to Interfox, unilaterally stated that despite the ban of official Kiev, the general Crimean referendum will be conducted, and I'll remind you, it is set for the 27th of March. The representatives of Russian parties of national patriotic orientation and several parliamentarians announced the creation of a movement called Accord in the Name of Russia. They issued an appeal in which they stated their intention to strive toward national accord and consolidation of society to renew the destroyed and now lost Russia. Among those who signed the document are Zyuganov, Tulev, Baburin, Prokhanov, Zorkin, Mikhalkov, and others. The former vice president of Russia, Alexander Rudskoy, feels that by acts of protest, the USSR cannot be restored. We must all understand that demonstration and meetings will not solve the problems. He announced these words and sent them to Itartas on the eve of the 17th of March, when the 3-year anniversary of the referendum to preserve the USSR will be celebrated. On that day, the government of Moscow has permitted a demonstration to be held. According to the notice, there are 40,000 people expected to attend. The chairman of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin, denied reports of certain sources of mass media that he had an exchange of opinions with Russian officials on the institution in the country of an emergency economic situation. Ivan Rybkin stated this at the plenary meeting of the State Duma. The economic reforms are progressing tightly because the high concentration of similar production at several major plants excludes free competition, encourages growth in prices, but does not stimulate quality of goods. This was said today at a press conference by the chairman of the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Russia, Leonid Bochin. He presented the long-term government program of demonopolization of the economy adopted by the government in March. It pursues openness of the economy, the stimulating of new structures which enter both the Russian and world markets, and stricter compliance with the law on competition. And yet, to abolish monopoly is not simple. The recently adopted new tariffs levels, especially on imported food products, they will even more strengthen the monopoly of our rural producers of foods and hit on the consumers' pockets. In essence, the program of demonopolization gives us an instrument to develop government resolutions that such lobbyist decisions must be absolutely agreed upon with the Anti-Monopolist Committee. From the point of view of preserving competitiveness, there's another problem which exists there. Unfortunately, quality import of foods do not enter our country. That is the sad part. Our country is becoming a dump site for a series of not only non-quality goods, but goods of dubious quality and even foods which threaten the lives of our population. Today, Interfox learned that the mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lushkov, signed instructions to increase the cost of transit on metro and city transportation. According to the instructions on the 18th of March, one metro fare will be 100 rubles and surface fare will cost 80 rubles. The problem of city transportation throughout Russia has for a long time caused concern of specialists and more irritability of millions of passengers, especially bus connections. And it daily, everywhere, takes on itself the basic volume of transit. Last year, despite the discontinuation of several routes, their volumes decreased only by 7%. But another figure especially puts one on guard. The park of vehicles had decreased by one-half, and of that half, only 25% can be conditionally considered to be substantially good for driving. The situation could have been corrected by last year's agreement on the export with Karos, but even it got stuck in the corridors of power. But our factory, Litino, which now is deprived of the Kamaz engine, was forced to reduce the assembly of vehicles, but has another problem, which could lead to an entire stoppage of the plant. It was traditionally received from the Raba plant in Hungary, and last year these engines were partially delivered, but the buses had to do with old engines. The buses were delivered only to purchasers who, after capital repair, would bring back the rear portion of Karos buses. This system is reminiscent of barter. Our old supplier in the city gear is fulfilling orders for vehicle plants of America and Germany. The general director of Barnava Zala tells us that we don't want to lose our old partner, and therefore we're open to all forms of cooperation with Russia. But evidently, our economy was paralyzed by such a severe crisis that even daily problems of urban transportation, of daily life, were forced to defer indefinitely. Specialists have developed now a program of transportation conversion, and if it receives a government subsidy, then by 1996 we will receive the engine and the rear bridge of buses, which not only go for buses, but for all our trolley buses which we produce in Russia. But for now, if we do not resolve this problem, then soon we will be able to announce a final bus stop. According to the assessments of experts, today Russia has only 57% of the necessary level of urban buses. Half of them have become obsolete and should be written off. And new developments in the area of vehicle manufacturing we learn more frequently from abroad. Mercedes and the prominent Swiss firm which produces the Swatch watches decided to jointly produce micro-automobiles. For the Western consumer, the Swatch is associated with a colorful, gay watch intended to bring happiness to its owner. The same concept is embedded in the new car, the dimensions of which are 2.5 meters in length and 1 meter 40 centimeters wide. The little one can be parked in the city not vertically but horizontally. It, for example, would be good for tourists, housewives, and for adolescents. Small but strong, this Swatch Mercedes, which will be issued beginning in 1997. It has a two-cylinder engine of 250 cubic centimeters. It weighs 10 kilograms, but its power is 40 horsepower. The speed of the automobile is up to 140 kilometers per hour. Gas consumption, 3 liters for 100 kilometers. In the trunk, 3 cases of beer fit. But the cost, the most important parameter, Mercedes, as you know, are not inexpensive, is around 25,000 marks. That is 1.5 times more than our best Lada. The Belarusian government intends to issue land lots to foreigners. And together with this, a law project was developed on amending the law on ownership on land. Land will be issued to foreign and judicial entities in order to realize major investment projects, but only with the decision of the Supreme Soviet of the Republic. It seems in spring there is no reason to hurry to our parts. We're not ready for guests here. The problem of Kyrgyz has come to this palace in Bishkek, where under one roof the president, the parliament, and the government cannot find agreement, at least in land reform. Askarakayev was unsuccessful in introducing into the new constitution the norm on land ownership directed at its purchase and sale. Leaning on the results of the referendum, he issued a decree according to which citizens and judicial entities of the Republic can own the right to use land lots and can sell, exchange, bequeath, or rent this right. The Free Peasant Associations are against. The bureaucrats who are sitting in the White House are many. In the decree, it is written that in 2 weeks they will issue this resolution on land. But now it is 4 weeks already that we've been waiting for this resolution. And today we have in our wallets not a kopeck, either to buy fuel or materials to conduct the spring field work. Someone in this White House rubs his hands in delight. The worse for them, the better for me. Lately, Belarusian doctors must state the high level of infirmity in the Republic more frequently than to give treatment. The reason is the absence of normal financing of treatment institutions, which are receiving only 1/3 of the promised budgetary allotments. And this when mortality exceeds birth rate, when annually more than 500 infants are born with heart defects, when there is an active growth of pediatric cancers, tuberculosis, and epidemic illnesses among adults. It is already evident that the source of humanitarian aid, which equipped the hospitals, is being depleted, and the health of the population is in a critical state. In Minsk, the international exhibit of medical equipment and medications opened and was visited by the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Belarus, Myacheslav Grib. This is a concrete search for Belarusian healthcare for the solution. The preparations of 170 firms from 32 countries of the world broaden the parameters of pure trade by creation creation of joint companies and cooperation on the barter basis, that which, without government financial injections, can provide the flow of the necessary technologies and medications. And also the Russian firm Ros established ties with the Belarusian Med Service and began to supply the necessary endoscopic technology, the Encefo cardio monitors and blood analyzers, surgical instruments. And a group of German firms, up to 50%, is paying for the cost of the equipment of the first neonatal center of Belarus. Great hopes among the doctors for American credits of $16 million. Belarus, in principle, did not produce its own medications according to the former rules of distribution of labor. Today, we must gain that which was lost. The people and their health is the most important thing. Today, again, there was an official presentation of the newly created government company Ros Weapons. It called to restore the monopoly of government on the export and import of weapons and military technology. This company intends to invest into companies of the defense industry and to create repair plants abroad and a center to train specialists. The general director of Ros Weapon was appointed. He is the Lieutenant General Viktor Samoilov. At the presentation spoke the first chairman of the government, Alexis Kavets, and the first deputy of Minister of Defense, Andrei Kakushin. The Minister of Defense of the United States, William Perry, left today for his trip to Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Belarus. He intends to discuss the problem of the liquidation of nuclear weapons and the questions of interrelations between the military departments of the USA and the new independent states. In his CIS tour, Perry stated the need to share with Russia with conversion technologies, but at the same time, Perry is known as a decisive supporter of creating such forms of new weapons as stealth planes and winged missiles. Today in Belgrade, the special representative of the President of Russia, Vitaly Churkin, met with the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Radovan Karadzic, and the chairman of the self-proclaimed Republic Serbian Ukraine. After the discussions, Vitaly Churkin gave an interview to our correspondent. After many contacts and discussions which we conducted during the last days with the Serbian and Croatian sides, today we reached an important agreement. On the initiative of Russia, the official delegations of Zagreb and Knin will meet on Tuesday, the 22nd of March, in the Russian embassy in Zagreb to conclude an agreement on ceasing military and other hostile activities in the regions currently guarded by the forces of the United Nations. And in this way, according to our convictions, we very much hope that there will be the realization of this initiative, which will permit to remove one more conflict situation on the territory of former Yugoslavia, and will be a substantial step toward the normalization of Serb-Croat relations, and therefore will enforce those dialogue political efforts, which during the last weeks were basically focused on the crisis and war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Without the normalization of Serb-Croat relations, a durable peace in former Yugoslavia is simply impossible. We hope that Russia will be able to contribute in a significant way to achieve the goal of political regularization. The president of Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, hosted in Kiev the former president of the United States, Richard Nixon. During their talks, they discussed the attracting of private American investments into Ukraine. Richard Nixon, in speaking with the press, called the Ukrainian president a prominent strategist, emphasizing that the visit of Kravchuk to Washington opened doors not only for official American aid, but private investment as well. Moldova has become the 12th nation joining the program Partnership for Peace, proposed in January by leaders of NATO to the Eastern European countries. Today, in the Brussels NATO headquarters, the president of Moldova, Snegodov, signed this agreement. Arriving in the American capital, the Prime Minister of Israel, Rabin, met today with the President Clinton and the Secretary of State, Christopher. The activization of the role of Russia in the Middle East was one of the themes of today's talks in Washington. Meanwhile, Israeli newspapers quoting official sources published today news that Rabin will visit Moscow and meet with the President of Russia around the 20th of April. The UN Defense Council will conduct a vote on the resolution on Hebron condemning Israel on Friday. In Belgium, the ministers of foreign affairs of the European Union countries agreed on the conditions for Norway's acceptance into this union. Discussion on another contentious issue, the procedure of acceptance of the decision of the Council of the European Union after the entry of new members into the union, ended unsuccessfully and was postponed until next Tuesday. The Golden Rule says to the British parliamentarians that before appearing in the House of Commons, the deputy must register in the Journal of Interests, and so thereby declaring his connection with the business world. The new journal contains stricter rules of entry than previously. Now, besides stating their relations with the business world, for example, as a consultant or a director of a company, the Member of Parliament must write into the journal many other things. For example, at whose expense did he travel abroad, what gifts were received from sponsors, major shares of what companies do they own. In the new register, the members of the Cabinet of Ministers cannot be found, since the ministers are forbidden to receive a second salary on the side. Although the former ministers, as a rule, have things to declare. And what regards the declaration of gifts, here the area is very broad, from computers to a herd of sheep to a jar of honey. Olga Maitland, a member of parliament from the Conservative Party, for example, voluntarily admitted that one of the sheikhs of Kuwait on Christmas presented her earrings and a brooch, and her husband a Cartier watch with a gold pin. In this regard, the rules for the ministers are more severe. They are allowed to keep gifts of a cost of up to £125 sterling. All the rest, it becomes automatically property of the government, or they can pay the difference from their own pocket. Not a bad monitor of business interests for the national electives thought up in England. In Italy, there is a two-day strike of journalists underway. Tomorrow, the country again will be without newspapers, and Friday and Saturday without radio and television news. With this action, the journalists are attempting to force the government to adopt measures on their social security. In the German city Stuttgart, 7 people have been killed. More than 20 have received serious burns as a result of a major fire, which broke out last night in an apartment building, where mostly refugees from other countries lived. For now, it is not known what was the reason of the fire, but arson is not ruled out. Authorities have begun investigating. The Finnish police in the city Lahti have an apartment building under siege in which escaped prisoners are in siege. One is a long time incarcerated as a hired assassin. The house has been surrounded by police who are restraining themselves from storming the building, since the criminals threaten to blow up the building in the event that there is an attempt to take them by force. For now, dialogues with the criminals have led to no results. In Russia, now, when we speak of national education and the support of science, politicians begin to discuss things for a long time, and businessmen can't begin to act. So the current situation was described at the press conference in Moscow, which was dedicated to the new global project of the famous international fund of George Soros, which will be implemented in Russia. The Minister of Education, Tkachenko, thanked the famous professor for the initiative and for his understanding of the fact that if great Russian science in this situation declines, then all progress of humanity will at least grow slower, and it is not known when the damage can be repaired. The new program presented at the press conference is dedicated to the renewal of humanitarian education in Russia. It is fortified by $250 million. For these means, more than 200 textbooks have been published. 100 middle schools, which will also be under the umbrella of the project, will also be financed from the fund. In the sphere of the program included are 27 national schools in Russia. The retraining of more than 5,000 teachers will take place. Answering journalists, George Soros said that his fund is implementing various programs in 25 countries, but Russia occupies a special place because it feeds the world with ideas, and he hopes that his step will awaken Russian businessmen. One cannot count on the future, feels the professor, without activity today. The cultural life of Moscow is always decorated by troops. And these days, on the stage of the Moscow theaters, there is a ballet performance of the actors of the French city Nantes and the dramatic from the Russian city Samara. The Theatre of Nations, recently called the Friendship of the Peoples, lately showed many presentations of Russian theatre on its stage in former republics. Bright acting and directorial works today presents the National Choreographical Center Nantes. Its director, Claude Brumachon, is one of the most famous choreographers of France of the new generation and shows a program of contemporary dance which defies any definition. And the success of his world tour has shown the troupe knows not only how to dance but sustain the audience's interests during the course of 1 hour because of choreographical devices. I think this is a continuation of what happened in France 20 years ago, says Claude. This was dictated by the need to make changes in the status quo of classical dance. Ballet and contemporary dance are two different things, although his dancers have finished the classical school. One cannot say what I do was born from nothing. This comes from the past, from tradition. Ballet innovation began in the 20th century. I know Michael Folkin, Nijinsky, and George Valenchin and their alterations to classical dance. The ideas of eternal beauty were always expressed in harmony, classical lines, and forms of the human body. I brought art into dance, which gave me the idea of space, knowledge of the body. In dance, I attempted to emancipate it, resurrect its possibilities. In dance, I'm interested more in the man and all his manifestations, everything that happens to him today, the broad specter of his emotions, and of course, love. Love, which is human, worldly, and heavenly as well, which dies on earth and is reborn again. It may be strange, but the history of world dramaturgy has only 12 eternal themes, and only the current era has added a 13th theme, the one of fascism. It was only a few years ago one couldn't believe that this problem would become so realistic. The play, The Warning, a line which was born in Germany itself, which only some people called fascism, was shown on the scene of the Wachtang of theater. The Magician, among the 3 performances which came to Moscow with the Samara dramatic troupe, and you see fragments of the Orchard of Love play. In 6 years, the theater will celebrate its half-century anniversary, one of the oldest on the Volga, in the Tanzhevskaya, Savina, and Pisarev. Unlike the old theaters, does not doubt that it will survive to the anniversary season without problems. And first of all, thanks to the viewers. How many empty seats have you left in the auditorium after the 3rd bell? As a rule, in the auditorium, there are almost no empty seats. The public does attend, and our economic situation allows us naturally to think about how to even go to Moscow on tour. Yes, maybe once upon a time the theater began with a coat hanger, but now it begins with all those for whom it's intended to think about eternal themes, and not only in theatrical auditoriums. Everything today begins with the viewer. Information on sports will follow our broadcast. I wish you all the best. The main athletic event today is in the League of Champions. Barcelona-Spartak. These shots take us back in time to 2 weeks ago, when our champions in Moscow were hopelessly losing and finally managed to save the match with a score of 2-2. Today, a repeat and key meeting in Spain. Hello. And so, at 22 hours, 20 minutes on the first channel, Ostankino, broadcast from Spain directly. And now we can speculate together with the Radio Echo Moscow. It gave us the news, the results of the poll of the fans on the streets of Moscow. 50% predicted a tie, 15% were for Barcelona, and 30% prefer Spartak. Among the optimists is Nikolai Nikolaevich Ozerov, who predicted 2-1 for Spartak. We'll see. And in waiting for the translation, we'll talk about other events. In the meantime, in the European Cup, a sensation. On the way to the semi-finals, the famous Madrid Real, in a return match with Paris Saint-Germain, ended 1-1. And it seemed this tie was like a shock for the Spanish, because they lost their first match with the French team 0-1. The good deeds of the renewed society of Spartak during the last 2 years, an entire series of championships for invalids in aid of children and orphans. These deeds could not and did not go unnoticed. The government of Moscow decided to return to Spartak its own house, number 4 on Malotomachov Alley, to create a central Spartak house, a house of physical education and sports. Its owners will be children, handicapped children, veterans of sport. The best grace of Moscow, Nina Azaripova, won 5 gold medals in the championship in the artistic gymnastics. 60 years ago, it was in Russia this fine form of sport was born. And how time flies. It's difficult to believe, but Georgy Sengisan's our friend, colleague, and sports commentator today is 60 years old. Respectful, Georgy Georgievich, 60. This is only the ripe age which decorates a man, and your next 1,000 hours in Efir, I believe, will be even better. The sport news team Ostankino congratulates you. The handball players of the Army, the champions of Russia, won the gold medal 5 games before the finish. The match was the Army against the Volgograd Kaustik. The Army won 23-21, and our congratulations to the Army champions. 3 tours before the finish, the International Hockey League's Torpedo Dynamo 3-4, Avangard Salavat Yulaev 1-1, Metallurg Novokuznetsk Itil 2-2, and Spartak Sokol 5-2. Information from the agency Turtas Sport. And the news from the National Hockey League. Face-to-face are our players, Pavel Bure, who plays for Vancouver, and against Sergei Fedorov from Detroit. In this micro match, Bure was the victor with 2 goals against 1 of Sergei Fedorov, but Fedorov's team, Detroit, won 5-2. And here, the American basketball star Michael Jordan left basketball in order to try out baseball. The debut of Jordan was highly successful, and who knows, maybe Michael will be a baseball star as well. 4-time world champion of the world, the French driver Formula 1 Alain Prost said in the interview to French television that he will not return to that form of sport. I didn't change my mind. The decision I made in September of last year, I will not return again. All the news of sports on Channel 1 Ostankino. Good evening. The cyclone defining the weather on the European continent has situated itself over Norway. According to the Meteorological Center, it will remain static. On its southern border, there's movement of warm, humid Atlantic air. Therefore, on the Kursk Peninsula, Karelia, Leningrad, Arkhangelsk, and districts in Komi Republic, cloudy weather with snow, wet snows in places. The winds from the south, 5 to 9 meters per second. During the night, 0, -5. During the day, -2, +3. In the east of the Republic of Komi and the Nenetsk Autonomous District, it is a little cooler. During the day, -2, -7. In Kaliningrad, in the Baltic countries, in the northwest and the north area of Belarusia, it will remain partly cloudy without significant precipitation. By the end of the day, in the zone of the atmospheric front, there is rain and rain with snow expected. During the night, 0. During the day, +1, +6. With the movement of the frontal zone from the southwest, the weather will improve in the central and central Chernozem areas. Here it will be partly cloudy with some brief snows with rain. The temperature at night, 0, -5. During the day, 0, +5. In the south of Belarusia, Moldova, Ukraine, partly cloudy, no precipitation. During the night, 0. During the day, +3, +8. In Moldova and the southwest Ukraine, up to +15 degrees. On the lower Volga and the east of Stavropol, there will be a warm air mass situated. Here it is partly cloudy. During the day, +2, +7. On the Rostov district, the Krasnodar area, and the west of Stavropol, an atmospheric front will move in. But expected to be cloudy with precipitation. The temperature at night, 0, +5. During the day, +4, +7. On the Black Sea coast, it will be up to +10 degrees with rain and thunderstorms. Beyond the Caucasus, intermittent cloudiness during the night, +1, +6. During the day, +7, +12. In Petersburg, tomorrow, cloudy, snow with rains, the winds from the southwest, 6 to 9 meters per second. During the night, 0, -2. During the day, +1, +3. In Moscow, tomorrow, it will be cloudy, and in places, snow with the rain, and it will be misty. The winds from the southwest, 5 to 8 meters per second. During the night, 0, -2. During the day, +1, +3. And that's all about the weather tomorrow. All the best.